Hi, my name is Glenn Smyth, CEO and founder of Fragile to Agile. Welcome to the second video in our series on developing an outcomes or business strategy and capability-driven roadmap for your organization's technology. If you haven't yet watched the overview video to this series, we recommend you do so. But by way of a brief summary, the 6 steps are: first, you determine what good looks like for your organization's intent. Then you develop a model to understand what your organization does. And then you determine the operating model and what this means for your organization's capabilities. This gives you sufficient understanding of the business to assess, with respect to technology, where you are now, determine where you need to be, and then the delta between them enables you to develop a program of work or a roadmap to get you from where you are to where you need to be. Okay, let's explore the first of these steps in more detail, determining the business intent or small s strategy for the period of your planning horizon, which we find typically to be different for different industry segments, shorter in financial services, longer in defense, for example. There are 2 approaches to this depending on whether you're doing it from first principles, from a blank page, or if prior strategic planning work has been done and you're leveraging this work to determine a set of measurable outcomes rather than reinventing the wheel. Before we cover these 2 different approaches, let's start with the end in mind and explore why we need this step at all and how these outcomes will be used. The first use is intangible but crucial, ensuring that the technology roadmap is driven by and traceable to what the business is trying to achieve, and achieving consensus across all the senior stakeholders on what is to be achieved. Over and above those, there are 3 direct, tangible ways the outcomes will be used as part of the roadmap development process. The first is to assess the ability of the current state to support achieving these outcomes, basically what parts of your current technology landscape can stay and what need to be replaced or enhanced. The second is to determine what the target state of your technology needs to be to achieve these outcomes. And then finally, to prioritize the elements of roadmap to deliver value early and focus on the outcomes of the biggest benefit. Together, these 3 activities ensure that you're doing the right things and maximizing the value from your technology investment. There's one of the key use of these outcomes related to governance rather than the roadmap itself. The outcomes drive the development of and support justifying adherence to a set of principles that ensure you're doing things right as well as doing the right things to achieve your target state. Now we understand the context of this step and how the business outcomes it produces are used. Let's explore the 2 different approaches to ascertaining them, from first principles and leveraging prior strategic outputs. The approach we use at Fragile to Agile to develop business intent from first principles is design thinking based, following a model originally developed by the pioneers of design thinking in Australia, Second Road. It is referred to as the ABCD method in its original form. Let's have a quick look at the theory before we cover it in practice. First, you explore, where are you now? What are the issues, challenges your organization is facing? Then, assuming these issues are fixed, what are the other more ambitious outcomes you're looking to achieve? So exploring, where do we need to be? Or as we like to say, defining what good looks like for your business. Then, if this is where we need to be, what do we need to get there? And then finally, how do we actually make that happen? One more key piece of theory we need to cover off. It is important to make sure you have all voices represented. The voice of intent, the person or people empowered to set the strategic direction. The voice of design, enterprise architects and other key design roles, CTO, digital transformation lead, chief scientists where they exist, represent that voice of design. In our experience, these 2 voices are not typically forgotten, but one which is crucial, both in design thinking and the Fragile to Agile method, is the voice of experience, the real frontline workers in the business. And they should also cover the voice of the customer, even covered by an internal role like chief customer officer or equivalent, but even better if you can get a real voice of the customer, maybe through some consultative body or the like. As a theory, how does it work in practice? Firstly, it is workshop based, and like any well-run workshop, it requires good preparation. Ideally taught the voice of intent and other key stakeholders in advance to seed some candidate issues and outcomes that they'd like to see raised and discussed at the workshop. And try to source some other candidates so that you're not entering the workshop with a blank page. When we were doing this at Fragile to Agile, we have the advantage and luxury really of being able to leverage our work at hundreds of organizations to look for other candidate outcomes that we've seen in similar organizations in the same industry segment, as well as suggest ones from other industry segments that we see as being potentially applicable to the organization. Apart from that, the other key preparation tasks are the same for any good design thinking workshop, or frankly, any good workshop. Get a good facilitator, lots of post-it notes, pens, parking lots, scribe, etc. For the workshop itself, always start with the issues. This is a key aspect of the approach, as it's key to enabling participants to clear their mind of any issues before they can think of more ambitious outcomes. Always take a break before moving on to the outcomes section, and you can point out at the start, assume all the issues we have already gathered will be addressed, but what else would you like to achieve rather than just fixing the issues? One useful prompt, often referred to as the Amazon way, is to ask them to think, what would the press release look like at the end of the execution of this strategy? It's important to look at the issues and outcomes as well from several perspectives. At the very least, these should cover customer, partner, staff, organizational, including financial. But others can be applicable for your organization, and we do tailor this. For example, sustainability, whole of government, technology outcomes, asset outcomes. One approach to the workshop is split into different groups, looking at each perspective, and then have the group come back and play their outcomes to the whole meeting for open discussion. Finally, for outcomes to be fit for purpose, they need to be SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely, not vague and unmeasurable. Avoid generic phrases like improve, increase, unless there's a specific target also added. You don't have to agree to this target at the workshop, but you need to ensure that it's possible to come up with one. Take another break, and then the group, collectively or split into teams, works through those outcomes, answering the key question. If this is what we want to be, what do we need to get there? It's important not to just consider technology here, but everything that's needed for success. For example, it might include, we need to establish a change management capability. We need to uplift the skills of our ICT staff. We need legislative change in this area too, blah, blah. The final step, how we make it happen, can be carried out after the workshop. We often do this because it's really the more mechanical stuff. The A's, the issues, the outcomes, the hypothesis, and the actions are then documented and issued to all participants and undergo a traditional review and update cycle. Now, strictly speaking, we only need the outcomes from this step. However, the what do we need to get there and how we make it happen outputs are key inputs to the target state and roadmap respectively. And even though they will be refined when we complete this whole exercise and are not complete until that's done, it's strongly recommended, an important soft outcome of this initial step, to gather these key ideas from the senior stakeholders, as it will ultimately greatly assist in achieving buy-in and gaining commitment. Once all these steps are completed, then you can produce this powerful one-page summary of the transformation. Okay, so what you do, and it's often the case for internal architects and consulting architects, where the organization has already developed a strategy, either internally or using a different consultancy. Naturally, there'll be no appetite to do this again for a technology roadmap. Just use what we've already done, being the common and perfectly understandable response. In this case, what you do is go through all that strategy documentation and extract candidate outcomes. How easy it will be to do this will vary significantly depending on the quality of the output from the prior strategic work, with the most common issue we find being the strategy is too vague and fluffy to ascertain any tangible, measurable outcomes. In this case, there's no alternative but to augment that strategy with your own candidate outcomes and adding suggested measures. Once collated, send these to the strategic stakeholders, ask them to validate them, explaining why they're needed, and stressing that this is just our attempt to save you time, so you don't have to start with a blank stage. It's probably wrong. Please tell it where it is, and then have we missed anything key? Once you've gathered all that feedback, reissue, and again, a traditional review and update cycle. One final note, always word the outcomes in the present tense. This is more philosophical, but from the theory, doing so, rather than expressing in the future tense, creates discomfort that we're not there yet. Whereas you put it in the future tense, there's no real drive to get there. In the present tense, it creates a level of discomfort where you are and a need and desire to get there. Hope this is of interest and value, and enjoy the rest of the series.